This meeting is being recorded.
Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus and I welcome you to our first Mythic Atlantis Mythic Monster crossover. And today we have a lot of great speakers, each of whom will share with you a little bit of their expertise and open the door to greater questions and more panels. And we are going to start with Athena Victory, who will take us into the world of Selkies. Greetings, Athena.
Hello. Selkies are one of my favorite mythological creatures, especially for the sea. And usually find the Selkie legends up and down the coast of Ireland, Scotland, the Pharaoh Islands, and Iceland, although they do show up throughout Scandinavia too. A lot of people who deal with seals worldwide have some sort of myth about the seals themselves, or that have them being seal people of some kind. The Inuit have Sedna, who is a goddess who, through misfortune, winds up getting her fingers chopped all off, and they all become sea creatures. And she guards the seals. The Greeks and Romans didn't have that many seal myths, other than Proteus was supposedly their herdsman. They had a rather negative view of seals in particular because they represented the unknown qualities of the sea, and so they're viewed with fear. So to this day, Mediterranean monk seals are much endangered, and it's because the Greeks and Romans slaughtered as many as they could back in the day. So I'll go into mostly the stuff from Iceland and Scotland about the Selkies. The word Selkie is actually a diminutive of silk, which is Gaelic for seal. So that's how they got their name. The myths about Selkies are usually a fisherman will see a beautiful woman on the beach and realize she's a Selkie. Probably because she's running around naked on a beach, I don't know, but she's left her seal skin on a rock or something, and he sees it and he realizes she's a Selkie. Now the Selkies do come ashore and they'll shed their seal skins and become very comely men or women. And to go back to the sea, they need to put that seal skin back on. So the fisherman will take her seal skin away from her, hide it someplace, lock it up somewhere, and force her to become his wife. And this could go on for years. Sometimes he has children with her, and she's kind of stuck being his concubine wife or whatever, bearing his children, and she's always longing for the sea. And sooner or later, either one of the children will find the sealskin and give it back to her, or she'll find it and she'll take off. Most of the time she leaves the half-human children behind, because she probably has a mate of her own and Selkie children in the sea, so she doesn't take them as well. That's usually the end of it. The one that was a myth that was a little different was the Pharaoh Islands, because they had a really in-depth myth using most of the same themes. They believed that the Selkies were the souls of people who drowned themselves voluntarily in the sea. And on 12th night, they were able to come on the beach and they would dance and stuff like that. So in that legend, the fisherman wanted to see the Selkies dance, was smitten by one of them, decided she just had to be his. So he steals her seal skin and locks it in a trunk. And so she has some years with him, unfortunately, until one day he goes off and he forgets the key to the trunk. By the time he comes back, she's gone with her sealskin, has left two children. Wait a minute, did she take her children? I think she might have taken her children with her, but she took away all the sharp objects and put out the fire so no harm would come to them. And he doesn't see her again, at least in the flesh. Eventually, he does have a dream. The men were deciding they were going to go into the sea caves and kill as many seals as they possibly could. So the seal wife appears to him in a dream and says, listen, my husband is a big bull seal and our children are in that cave. And I'll describe what their hides look like. Do not harm them. Please do not harm them. And he wakes up, it's just a dream, and the men go to the cave and they slaughter every last seal. And he has his prize, gets the head of the big bull seal, and he flippers the two pups, and he brings them home and cooks them. Well, in Iceland and in the Scandinavian countries, the Selkies also have a bit of a troll aspect. So she comes bursting out of the smoke room in troll form and starts sniffing around and says, "You've killed my husband, you've killed my children. So because of this, you and the men of the islands are going to be cursed. Until all of them are punished, and not long enough, there's going to be all the men who fall off the cliffs or drown in the sea are going to keep dying that way until you can have them hold hands and encircle the entire island." And apparently that's still going on because men are still drowning and falling off the cliffs there.
Wow.
This is one of the few times you see a Selkie do anything like that, because usually they're kind of passive about it. It's like, okay, I'm leaving you now, bud, and that's it. This time she had a stake in it. There was children involved. There was her Selkie husband involved. And there are male Selkies. Their legend's usually a little different. Supposedly a woman can summon them if she's unhappy in a relationship by shedding 7 tears into the sea. And then he will come and he'll basically wine and dine her, and eventually maybe they'll move into the ocean together. It's not really said, but apparently he will treat her much better than whatever man she has then, and that's it with that. There was a really, really good movie. It was called The Secret of Roninish, which means the secret of Seal Island in Irish. And it was a story of a family that was descended from the Selkies, and one of the little boys of the family disappeared, but he's on the sea, and his older sister sees him and eventually tries to tame him and gets him to come back out of the water. And it's really a very charming one. It's one of my favorite. It's one of the few movies about Selkies other than animated features, and I highly recommend that one. Other ones for seal people are some Native American ones, and you'll see it with the Kiklit tribe. Sometimes the clans have a seal emblem, and the Inuit tend to, even though they hunt seals, are very respectful of seals. They believe they have souls. So if you kill a seal, you're supposed to give it a drink of fresh water, not salt water. You're supposed to honor it and things like that. Seals do seem to like divers. I see all sorts of videos with seals being very playful and interacting with them, even warning them of danger. There was a really, really funny video, if you ever could search it on YouTube someplace, of someone who was studying leopard seals. Now, leopard seals are frightening. They're huge. They eat penguins. They're alpha predators. When you see penguins jumping out of the water, it's usually because there's a leopard seal in there. So this leopard seal, when he was in the water, decided he was possibly a mentally challenged leopard seal that couldn't find food for himself. So she kept bringing him dead penguins. And sometimes they were alive and they took off. And then other times she kind of put the dead penguin on his head. And he, of course, wasn't going to eat it. But she never tried to hurt him in any way, shape, or form. But this is kind of some of the interactions people have with seals even today. I also saw a seal jump out of the water and come on a boat because there was an orca in the water, and it was afraid. And so it decided, well, I'm going to hang out here by the humans on this boat where I know I'm safe. And he was quite civilized about it. He didn't try to hurt anybody, but he wasn't going to go in the water. So people do have very positive interactions with the seals. A lot of people will say they're kind of sea puppies because they're very dog-like, or seals are dog mermaids. So you could see how you could get people looking at seals who are kind of bound between the water and the land, and think to themselves, wow, this has a soul. This is something that could become human. This is something that possibly would make a good mate for life. And so that's the basic stuff about Selkies. I don't know if you have any questions.
Well, I remember the incident with the leopard seal that you're talking about, and it was quite amazing. The seal was definitely trying to feed him as if he was a child. So it's like, why wasn't he doing things seals do? So she'd bring him dead penguins and other things, and was trying to show him that this is something he should be eating or so forth. So that was very fascinating. And yes, in Greek folklore and mythology and legendary, seals don't play a prominent part. But shapeshifters who are in the sea, like Proteus that you mentioned, do sometimes assume seal shape. The word for seal in Greek sounds like a curse in English. It's phokes. So, but thank you very much. That was very interesting. And I remember we saw the Roan Inish movie together like a decade ago. It was a great movie. We should watch it again.
That's it's just a classic, and it's like it's kind of whimsical, and it's basically you have the Celtic soul there right in that movie with the Selkies.
And you are very much Celt.
Very
Thank
much.
you very much. And now the legendary Brian J. Walker of Brian's Drive-In Theater. Genius when it comes to all things cinematic and retro. Greetings and welcome, Brian. How are you?
I am well tonight, and you know you don't have to qualify that statement.
No, it stands for itself. You do. If I knew how to do images on the computer, I would make a statue of you and have it appear whenever you're about to speak.
It's sort of like wait a minute, I don't know what my good side is anymore. It used to be my right side, but you know, who knows? All
your sides are good, Brian. You're awesome.
Well, thank you. I suddenly feel a lot better about myself. But tonight I want to talk about humanoid sea creatures. It's a very common theme in old drive-in movies and some of my favorite movies, for example. I wanted to talk about the creature from the Black Lagoon from 1954 for a number of reasons. For one thing, it has the Gill Man, who is one of the later Universal monsters and one of the most popular ones. As you may know, Creature from the Black Lagoon, the original one, was released in 3D in 1954. Unfortunately, I have never been able to see a 3D version of the original film, which is a shame. I would love to see. You can tell even in 2D how some of the effects would have worked. But in the trilogy of Creature from the Black Lagoon movies, there were three, and they were released one a year. The original Creature from the Black Lagoon from 1954 with Richard Carlson, Julie Adams, and Richard Denning. And the second film is Revenge of the Creature from 1955, and that has one of my favorite actresses in it, Laurie Nelson, who was a Universal contract player in the 50s, and she co-stars with John Bromfield and John Agar, also contract players for Universal in the 1950s. The final film is The Creature Walks Among Us with another one of my favorite actors, Rex Reason, and he is the lead in the movie, along with Jeff Morrow and Lee Snowden. And I have pages on the drive-in site for almost all of those actors. I just lack a couple there. And, the year is young. Who knows? I might be able to get a few more pages up if I ever finish the update for the drive-in. In these 1950s Universal movies, the monster seems to be a relic of the past, perhaps something prehistoric that didn't get wiped out by a meteor or something of that nature. As we move into the 1960s and as we start actually thinking about some of these bad chemicals that we're manufacturing, the sci-fi movies, when it comes to humanoid sea creatures, started to take a different slant. And I think you can really see this in one of my favorite, and I shouldn't call it a bad movie, but it is a bad movie. It's The Horror of Party Beach, a movie that I first saw as a teenager, and I love it still today. Was made by Del Tinney, who was a B-movie director in Stamford, Connecticut in the early 60s. And matter of fact, this movie was made in 1963. And it involves some nuclear waste that's been deposited via 55-gallon drums into the ocean just off of, I believe it's New York. I think that's where it's set. And it has rapidly made these sea creatures and some old bones of humans sort of evolve into these giant monsters, which are, humanoid in that they have feet, they have arms, legs, but very bizarre looking costume overall. The movie's a lot of fun, however, and if you can ever watch this or one of Del Tinney's, unfortunately, few other films, give them a shot, because although you might make the argument that the quality isn't great, the movies are a whole lot of fun to watch. And they're not ineptly made. I mean, the lighting is okay, the dubbing's okay, the talent is good, but sometimes the storyline might have been just a little absurd. And moving on to a movie that I was watching just a few minutes ago before we started, which is Terror Beneath the Sea. And this is Sonny Chiba from 1966. It's a Japanese film, but it has an international cast. The lead is obviously Sonny Chiba, who sadly passed away just last year. And the female lead in this is Peggy Neal, who was an American actress who did several movies in Japan in the mid-60s. And there's some German actors in it as well, so it's really more of an international effort. Some of the effects in it are pretty good. There's a lot of, during that period, the Japanese did a lot with models in order to be able to do science fiction without having to drop huge amounts of money into it, and they were pretty good at it. The scenes in Terror Beneath the Sea that call for a lot of underwater missiles and things like that look pretty good. Unfortunately, the humanoid sea monster creation doesn't look so good, especially from the back. You can see the zipper and the costume and such. And for whatever reason, the director has the monsters facing away from the camera more than he has them facing forward. The effect from here is not bad. It actually is pretty scary at first, until you see that the boots don't fit the actors very well, and the zipper that's up the back, unfortunately. Fast forward to 1980, another one of my favorite humanoids from the deep with Doug McClure. It is a fantastic film to watch, a lot of fun. And as a matter of fact, I watched it just the other night. The movie really has a kind of an interesting origin. It was directed by Barbara Peters. And she had a certain vision for the movie. She was a feminist, but she wanted to make just a straight up sci-fi horror movie, and it does have some scenes in it that are pretty terrifying, pretty shocking, graphic, even for 1980, pretty graphic. And it's a nice film. It's got a great cast. Anne Turkel and Vic Morrow are in it, and a lot of character actors, people that you saw on TV hundreds of times. People like Hoke Howell, who was a very reliable character actor in the film. Where the film kind of goes in a different direction is this. It was produced by Roger Corman's New World Pictures. And when Corman saw the director's cut of the movie, he didn't think there was enough sex and violence in it. So he decided that he wanted new scenes inserted with sex and violence, and the director wouldn't do it. She refused. So he hired a second unit director to kind of insert some nudity into it. And he also had the humanoids from the deep, raping young nubile victims. and inserted all of these scenes into the film, which drove the director crazy. She wanted her name removed from the film. And in order to do that, he suggested that she pay to have the title sequence reshot because it was already in the can. So she didn't do that. I think she reached a sort of peace with it not too long ago. I read an interview with her where she said that she actually caught the movie on late night TV a few years ago, and she enjoyed watching it. So I guess she's forgiven and forgotten. You know, her run-in with Roger Corman.
I recently saw Humanoids from the Deep, I think, and it's in the stack with both the remake and the original Breeders, which kind of fit into the same category of film.
Well, I'm ashamed to say that we have it on Blu-rays. but you know what? It looks fantastic. And the sound was pretty good. You know, Corman, gets knocked often, and sometimes rightfully so, for churning out product, I probably should say. But the quality is there, you know, and like I said, the performances are good, reliable character actors that you've seen in tons of stuff. It's not that cheap. Some of the scenes with the insertions of the humanoids, like I said, raping their victims. I would like to have seen Barbara Peters' cut of the movie, which I'm sure doesn't exist in any form, unfortunately. But I would like to have seen that take on it. That's the only disappointing thing about the film, really.
It doesn't live on as one of my immortal classics that I can do without, but again, it was an interesting and well done movie. And Roger Corman also did several Peplum films. One of them he made the same movie 3 times. I couldn't believe it. Had different stars and different.
He made the same movie more than 3 times.
Yeah, it's the same story. Sometimes it's even the same names aren't even recycled.
Oh, true.
Like he had with Amazons and Gladiators, which had 2 incarnations previously, and again, it's the same movie essentially with different people.
Well, he was the master at that. But what I shouldn't say was, I mean, he's still with us. He's 96 years old. And as of just a few years ago, he was producing movies for the Sci-Fi Network.
Is he still doing that?
It's at 96. I really hope for his sake that he's kicking back and enjoying life at this point. I would hope that he wouldn't still be trying to make really terrible movies. Just look over your life's work if you have.
But he added so much because he churns out movies to our popular culture, and popular culture, as we've discussed many times, is the mythology and the folklore of our day and age. So
Very
these
true.
are the forms that these immortal stories take to appeal to us and to draw our attention in and to live on in our memory. And he's certainly in that regard deserves to be honored as a bard, or I don't know what else I would call him.
Oh, well, visionary too. I mean, look at the film genre that he created by himself. All of those early 60s Edgar Allan Poe movies that Vincent Price and Boris Karloff starred in, those were immensely successful, cost nothing to produce. And there again, he did go out and get really good talent. I mean, he knew what he was doing, and where he spent money, it showed. You could see where he spent the money.
He did something that I've seen Lloyd Kaufman do it in his movies. Lloyd will find people who have talent and give them their opportunity to shine in his movies, and he gets them for next to nothing or nothing, because they're looking for these opportunities, and then they have a chance to be seen through his movie. And I believe James Gunn, who's now very popular and famous or infamous, depending on how you approach his fame. I remember when he was making a trauma movie or 2, and that's how he started as well. Trey and Matt, who do South Park, They started out with Hannibal the Musical, which Lloyd even named for them. It was called something different. So Corman did that as well. He'd look for talent, give them their break.
You
And
just muted.
did I?
Yep, you just muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted here. Am I still muted?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, that's a signal from the universe or the Zoom gods to proceed. Thank you, Brian. You remain awesome, and I enjoyed your presentation a great deal. And now we move on to someone new in our company, Hal Rainbow. And Hal is very articulate. Hal is very knowledgeable. Hal is a teacher. Hal is an artist. And Hal is a puppeteer, which is really, really, really cool. So without further ado, Hal is going to tell us all about mermaids. Greetings and welcome, Hal.
Greetings. Okay, mermaids. Mermaids have been around forever and in just about every culture. And they are either realistic, horrifying, or pretty well comic. I was introduced to the subject of them when I was about 4 or 5, I think. There was a horrible attraction in Florida called the Wiki Waki Mermaids. I don't know if any of you were there.
No, but I heard of it.
Was a bunch of underwater swimmers who claimed they were mermaids and had these air pipes all over the place that they would take a breath from, true schlock. But at any rate, the manager of the venue over the loudspeaker asked, if my parents would come to the manager's office, because I was yelling at the manager that the sign said mermaids and there are no mermaids in there. And I wanted to know where he kept the real mermaids. So after that, it kept going. But as I said, mermaids have been around for a few thousand years. The oldest one mentioned was from the Babylonian gods. One of the goddesses jumped in the water, took the form of a fish and kept it. And then, like what you were saying about the Inuit Indians, the same story, she becomes a mermaid versus a Selkie. And then kind of moved down through Europe, where the whole myth of the beautiful mermaid, the half woman, half fish, became more and more popular. And as one of my students pointed out recently, she's not a fish, she's an amphibian, because she can breathe air and swim underwater. So it's like, okay, I'll buy that. But as I said, the traditional look is half fish and the upper half of a woman who generally, when you see her, is sitting on a rock, either combing her hair or, with cause of vanity, having a mirror or a red cap, which allows them to stay in the water. And if you can catch a mermaid, it generally brings you luck. You can get wishes or riches. There's numerous stories where they become singers in church choirs, which never seemed quite right, but I guess it was a way that when they find the mermaid, they convert them to be able to live on land. So there's numerous stories along that lines. And then there's also Columbus's famous quote of, "Yesterday we saw mermaids, they are not as pretty as pictured." And they believed that he had seen manatees. But the legend of the mermaid has changed a lot over the centuries. Originally, they were very dangerous creatures. They brought storms. They lured sailors to their death by drowning them. They were harbingers of doom. If you heard a mermaid sing, your life had pretty well ended. And then over the centuries, they became sort of friendlier and friendlier. And if you helped the mermaid, she'd grant you wishes. She'd provide you with money. And they became much more, helpful to humans. They've also been incorporated into a lot of different myths. Sirens are often confused with mermaids. The Lorelei is often called a mermaid. They show up in movies constantly, mostly fantasy movies. Sometimes now there's horror movies featuring mermaids. There was one called The She Creature, which was a horrible 50s movie about a woman who was kind of a lobster, but they redid it as a horror film about a mermaid. And what really, though, turned the tide of mermaids, pardon the expression, was Hans Christian Andersen, who decided mermaids wanted souls and they were kind and they were loving. And it was a horrible story, actually, where the sea witch makes the deal with the mermaid that she can become human, but she, unlike with the Disney version, cuts out her tongue, that every step she takes will be like walking on razors. And if the prince marries someone the next morning, someone besides her, the next morning she's going to become sea foam. So, and I say it is a pretty grisly story, and in most of the versions they put out now, she marries the prince and it's very happy. In the original version, the prince marries someone else, she throws herself into the sea, becomes sea foam, and that's the end of the story. But of course, most places don't really want to put these things out for kids.
No.
Along the same lines, as beautiful as the mermaids are, the mermen are not particularly good looking. They're large, they're greenish tint, they have green hair, red noses, and also want to mate with land women, but it's needless to say, not too successful. Some of them, there's been legends, some of them, if they do capture sailors, keep their souls in a jar in their lairs in the bottom of the sea. So as a race, they're very cold and fairly calculating group. But as I said, what mostly changed mermaids was Hans Christian Andersen. And they've been playing around with his story for hundreds of years. Disney originally was going to put them into the movie Fantasia. An artist named Marc Davis was doing the illustrations, and they were going to do the actual story. But then Disney decided it was a little too gory, and then they remade it years later as The Little Mermaid that's become popular now. And in Japan, though, they have a very different history of mermaids. They have a creature called the Nyago, which is a fish with a human head. And that's as far as the comparison goes. And the legends of, well, the human head is actually, it's more of a human head with a monkey's mouth. It's more of a horror creature. And so the legend has it that if you eat the flesh of a Nyago, you will gain immortality, or you will become an insane creature. You don't know which, but it's just one or the other. Try your luck. There's a very famous set of manga books called Mermaid Forest, where they go through that legend. And also the P.T. Barnum mermaid is somewhat based on the Japanese mermaid. The idea of, again, the monkey's head, the upper body, and the tail, which P.T. Barnum's mermaid was probably the greatest thing ever invented. He claimed he had a real mermaid. He billed it as a real mermaid. And what he had was a monkey skeleton sewn to a salmon tail. And it, and it brought people in droves. And, for reasons I don't understand, they believed that it was the actual thing. If you want to see one, they have one at the Smithsonian in Washington. Or you can buy some really bad imitations on eBay, which has been tempting, but no. And so those are that's the stranger Japanese legend of mermaids, which are a little cruel, as I say. The mermaid doesn't change in Japan for thousands of years, again, till Europeans start coming into Japan. They bring the Hans Christian Andersen story, and then the Nyago goes off to the side and she becomes more of the mermaid that we're familiar with today. The legends of mermaids having tails in the sea and legs on land it's an invention, another invention of Walt Disney's, because it worked out better for the movies. The more common legends, mermaids need a sedan chair, or in more modern times, a wheelchair to take them around. And again, in popular culture, there was a movie called Miranda about a mermaid who wants to see Cornwall and London. And that actually stays closer to the earlier myths about mermaids wanting to see the land, wanting to trick men, wanting men to adore them, which is a fairly common theme in most mermaid stories. And again, a lot of mermaid stories, there's not that many of them. They're beautiful, they're vain, they want to lure you to your death, or they want to see land. Those are probably the most common stories about them. There was a show on Animal Planet called Mermaid, the Body Found, and Mermaid, the New Evidence, which went over so well that NOAA had to issue a statement that as far as the US Navy is concerned, there has been no proof of mermaids. And well, to date there hasn't been, but they've been enough in popular culture that, what was they figured out? 85% of people believe they do exist. Personally, it would be nice if they do. It would, there hasn't been enough exploration that they don't know exactly fully what's down there. So, I would like to think they do. And what other things about them? Oh, and the other thing that mermaids became famous for, during the medieval ages, the Catholic Church always wanted something of sin. So since mermaids were mostly predicted as bare-breasted, the Catholic Church launched onto them, and they were the symbol of prostitution. Hence, you get a lot of mermaids with the two tails, as the split was, obviously sexual in nature, and they were carved into churches, to church pews, to warn women about lack of virtue and such. So that became a very famous symbol in the Middle Ages. And then Starbucks coffee opened up, and Starbucks coffee decided that their logo was going to be a mermaid, and they took the exact mermaid from the Catholic Church, which I always thought was particularly funny, that here is this coffee company, showing that they're great for everyone with the symbol of prostitution as their logo. Well, somebody finally decided to tell Starbucks what was going on. And again, slowly over the years, it became more stylized and less realistic. Plus, they also got sued a couple of times on morality charges. So, that's probably, Starbucks is probably the most famous case of mermaids in the modern era. And so, as I said, they've been throughout history. Every culture has a version of them. They also, very often, they get confused with Selkies, with nymphs, with sirens. The earliest versions, and I believe in Greek mythology, they're bird women, the sirens. Mm-hmm. And I'm not quite sure I've never been able to find out how the changeover went from bird women to mermaids. It's usually a form of repentance. I know in a lot of cultures, mermaids came into being because they were the souls of women who have committed suicide, and it's their way of redeeming themselves. So their lore is not particularly a happy one. And again, I'm sorry this is going all over the place. In Israel today, I believe it's Hafia, where they have $1 million prize if you can prove a mermaid is actually living there. And to date, no one's claimed it. There's been a lot of people who've tried and claimed they had videotape of it, but to date, nobody's won it. There's also been, again, this is modern, a lot of work on skeletal mermaids or mermaids that have supposedly washed up on shore, where they can't quite identify all of it. There's been some major fakes. There's some great skeletal mermaids that have shown up in France that, again, have washed up on shore till, unfortunately, they found out that they were sewn together bones. But there have been some sonogrammed cases where there is noise that they can identify as any other sea creature. So there is hope that they actually do exist. And it should be interesting to see how the myth keeps evolving.
That it should. And I can answer some of the questions that you brought up. I'm a Lemnian Greek. Lemnos was part of a pre-Greek empire, before it became Greece. So a lot of the mythology from this pre-Greek empire still exists in the folklores and myths around Lemnos. Near the island, there were water kingdoms, and one of them belonged to Amphitrite, who's Poseidon's wife. And when Hephaestus fell, she took him in and found out that he was very handy. And so he made a lot of jewelry and weapons for Poseidon's court, until Hera at an event noticed the jewelry and made a comment, and then they took Hephaestus back into Olympus. But Hephaestus had his forge on Lemnos, which was partially a volcano. And the other kingdom was the kingdom of mermaids. Now you're right, mermaids were occasionally called gorgones. And the queen of the gorgones, which is where we get the word gorgon from, which means something totally different now. Gorgons are like the Medusa and the Gorgon sisters, snake for hair monsters. Back then it just meant mermaids. So they were usually, whereas Amphitrite and her court looked like people, the gorgones, or the mermaids, were half fish and half human. And there were other undersea people like Tritons, who were also usually displayed as half fish, half human, sometimes with split tails resembling legs, and sometimes with one fish tail. They're portrayed, and they're shown having dolphins or giant seahorses or hippogriffs, pulling their underwater chariots. You're right about the sirens. The sirens were not mermaids. The sirens were bird women. And they would lure sailors with their song. But somehow in the folklore, in popular folklore, the sirens became mermaids. I guess because mermaids looked more appealing graphically than bird women might look. And Starbucks, yes, I remember when Starbucks came out, I noticed the mermaid symbol, and I thought that they would have trouble with that because other brands that have symbols that have other meanings than the one assigned by the company often get into trouble, and people sue them. People make all sorts of horrible videos or write horrible articles. So yeah, I've been following that with Starbucks, and hopefully they can resolve that. Thank you, Hal. That was very interesting and very comprehensive presentation. And
Thank
even
you.
though what we perceived was jumping around, you covered a lot of territory. There's a lot to go back to. Thank you, and I'm hoping that you come back again and join our panels.
Would be my pleasure.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Circe was supposed to give a background on the Greek water beings, but she's not here today. The only other water being I could talk about is the nymphs. Nymphs are a class of being in Greek mythology that people still believe in today. they'll tell you that they don't, that only superstitious people believe in them, but they're still the most seen. And mermaids, you're right too. Many years when I tracked that type of thing, there were more mermaid sightings than UFO sightings. And we know how prevalent UFOs are in our culture. The Nereides, they were usually tied to natural waters, either fresh or sea. And there were different Nereides. The Oreads were mostly with the water that had salt in it. But they had very, very intricate stories. They too, had their animal shapes and their human shapes. They too can get tricked and wound up being fooled into marrying mortals, and they too yearned for their watery element. And often when they found a piece of jewelry or a piece of pelt or whatever belonged to their other shapes, they would switch back. So you're right, these tales are very, very old. You spoke about Babylon, the Atlantis myth. Now, if you look at the oldest depictions of Atlantis, it's clearly a man wearing a fish costume. Just like when you look at the older depictions of centaurs, it's certainly a person on a horse and not a hybrid horse person. And also some of the other mythical beasts, they're definitely people, like in some early werewolf legends too. The werewolves are wearing werewolf costumes, and I remember in one of them they called a doctor, and the doctor had to unbutton the pelt and examine the person and treat them in their werewolf garb. But again, that's the topic for another show. And I don't know if our next guest is here or not. Somebody's glinging me on Facebook. So what we're going to do is we're going to move to Marc. And let me try to sort that out. And Marc, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Marc Brinkerhoff.
I think your mic's muted, Marc.
There you are.
There we go.
Clicked by accident something. How are you all doing? Thank you for having Phyllis and me. And Phyllis is off camera.
Hi, Phyllis. Oh, we got Phyllis's hand. No foot this time?
No foot.
No foot.
To hand. Awesome.
I love what we're talking about because we know myths are based on actual something that someone saw maybe a few turns of the planet Earth before. I have a picture of a mermaid I painted how I've seen them. And she's petting an oyster catcher bird on the seashore. That's the one that looks kind of fish-like. Whoops. But there's others that look seal face-like, but not a seal's face. I was trying to draw one, but it wouldn't come out correct. I'm so sorry.
Were you just trying to do it right now?
I was trying to doodle while we were talking, but it's not exact. The face is not a snout. I was trying to sketch that, and I kept coming up with my seal friend, But like instead of a broad nose, it
But I
was more of
think
a
you need to just
nose.
clarify that we're talking about the nature
Nature
spirit
spirits.
kingdom.
Yeah.
Nature spirit
Thanks,
kingdom.
Phyllis, because
Yeah.
I'm all over the place. I'm talking about the nature spirit kingdom or the elemental kingdom, and that mermaid we saw here is an elemental kingdom. Now, maybe way back during it past the Atlantean times now, but they were doing experiments in another time too, another flip of the planet. These creatures might have been created. They might have been there, but I'm dealing with the nature spirit people and Pan and what I know from them. On the seashores, we were at
Compton,
Lake Compton. I'm sorry,
Rhode
Compton, Rhode Island. And one of the fairies on the seashores, I see them just like we see people, but they're transparent sometimes. When they do show up for me physically, they're utilizing energy within my aura, like a screen effect, but they utilize it and appear. So I've had a fairy, an elf appear, sitting on the shelf actually, before the famous elf on a shelf. And his name is Hyan. And we have a unicorn that materialized. I've had a dragon here, a white dragon. That was small, then it grew and it grew. And my cat responded with it and played with it. Phyllis saw the dragon a couple times with me. And the unicorn I was here alone with, I was painting a picture of Pegasus. And the unicorn walked into the dining room area where I was painting, which is here. And I was in the kitchen area, which is a hall behind me. And I saw the unicorn walk in. When it disappeared, it did a pawing and it looked at me, shook its head. It was about the size of a large German Shepherd or a miniature horse, and it looked like an Arabian almost, with a long tail. The tail looked just like a unicorn, but then there's no hair on the top, going down to a long trailing horse's tail. Hair was very
So
silky.
truly basically looks like a lion tail.
It looked,
Yeah,
yes.
it's a classical.
If you can imagine a lion tail and then add hair to it coming down, not a long tail, but it arched it just like a Arabian horse. So it shook its head, it walked into the
But we're
room,
talking about
and
water-
disappeared.
Water beings.
When it disappeared, it left the smell of the forest and flowers in the room, and it was winter. So I'm telling these stories, they're not stories, they're real. These beings are real. Nature spirits can appear and disappear at their will. They've always told me, we appear to you and we give it as a gift. If we show physical to you, that's a gift. And they're utilizing, again, energy from our energy fields to make a substance form. Otherwise, you're seeing them go by you peripherally as a ball of light, as a fairy. They'll appear with wings. I saw one the other night when on plants again, she was jumping around. So they will show up in forms that look shadowy or colors. But when they really show up for you, they'll be physical, looking like a real little person with pointed ears and large eyes. So I'm going to show you a few things we got at Lake I keep saying Lake Compton.
No, it's-
Compton, Rhode Island.
The seashore.
This is this fairy here. The sea fairies are sometimes look like translucent, bubbly looking people. You'll see through them in shades of blue and glass-like colors.
But I think what you should just say
What?
is that when you, Mark had gone down to the seashore by himself and he was just,
Oh,
because they
I'm
don't,
trying to do this fast.
they
I'm
don't
sorry.
know why
Yeah.
you found.
I went to the seashore at a house that we were all staying at with friends. And I was seeing all the fairies on the seashore and elves. And this was a seashore of rocks all over the place
A lot of
in
rocks.
Rhode Island. And I'm looking at the water, and I said to one of the little fairies there, and they're about 5-6 inches high. And I said, do you have anything shaped like a heart that you can show me, a rock around here? And I actually said a heart. So the one of them went running off. And then I saw it in the distance pointing to the ground. So I went over to where that was, and it came up with a,
It was more, no, not that one.
it was more of a,
It was more of a heart.
one over here. I have another one. I have so many of these heart stones that they showed me.
Actually,
More like the red one behind you. Something like this. And you can see how it kind of looks heart shaped. Sorry. Heart shaped in different ways. And the other one was like this. And I said, not as something that looks like a chicken's heart. This is actually Jean. They all have gnome elf-like beings in them. I went on the sand and I drew this, a heart, like a cartoon heart that we all know from cards. So they went off taking off with their friends, and I see them pointing to the areas. They get me coming over. They showed me this, so they allowed me to take them. This is Seal. This is what they look like. One of them is Toll. This is Toll. He was showing me his rock, and you see how they put little hats on because they're elf-like gnomes. And this is his rock that he was showing me. It was on the side like that. This is Bota. This is a female. Male.
I can't really see them that clearly, Mark. Later on, if you send me some images, I'll include them with the link.
A heart. Okay. This is Kal. Kind of a heart-shaped, modern-looking heart. This is Bailey.
you have to pull it back.
There it is. See the heart shapes on top. Is Holden. So he shows up like, they're pointing to me on the seashore. I've got way more than that, but they just showed me all kinds of heart-shaped rocks. And one that was split in half. They showed me one part, and I found it, and I said, oh, that's great. And then another fairy says, over here, way over here, like 10 feet away. And I found the part that they showed me. I had to dig in the sand to get things out that they were pointing down into the dirt, below more rocks. And I pulled out, and Phyllis is actually looking for that rock on the puppy table. I'm sorry, but when I got the two together, they actually latched together as one rock, and they were split in half.
Okay, that's okay.
Back there probably. But just to let people understand, the fairies can take on any form they need. So they will be water type little creatures in the water swimming, looking like mermaids. When they feel, then they climb up onto the shore and they might be light. Then they form little bodies forms if they want us to see them. Otherwise, they just are light forms that they show me and how they look. The fairy, I'm sorry, the nature spirit that looks like this takes on the form because she wants to be in the water or heat. And the males look like elves. They actually have longer ears and everything. So they're very beautiful. They take on any skin tone they want, from green to dark colors to seaweed tones. And they either put skin on their body like the scales of a fish that they like. They told me we pick animals we like. So you might actually see a shark body on one, or the seal body on some, because they love the water animals and dolphins and porpoise. So they will put those body forms on themselves too. So this is how they've described what they do. And I've seen them underwater. And if I looked over a boat in the ocean when we were out there, I saw the water fairy looking like the sea, again, I'm trying to talk too much, looking like a mermaid. And they are big. They're not just the size of humans. Some of these get really big. So we've got to think nature being of the water, and they can get huge if they need to. So there are some people had seen these psychically, and I feel intuitively, hundreds of years ago, as well as the ones that we know as, like we were saying, Hercules, the ones that are on the land. I saw one, the Nereids, right? I call them the Nymphs. They look like females, and they will play in the water. And we were in Connecticut, and we saw a waterfall, and there was one in the waterfall. I was telling Phyllis, she's in the waterfall, she's like dancing, and then she'd come out and she'd go back in the waterfall. The fairies love water. If you want to attract fairies to your house, or besides with plants that you get, if you want the flying fairies coming around, because they don't have a plant all the time, they bless other plants and baby plants. So I've had them in the house here. If you put together a little waterfall in your yard, or if you have a portable waterfall to make in your house that they sell in stores, put little trinkets around it, like little pieces of glass,
Shiny
mirror.
mirrors.
They love mirrors, little mirrors. They love shiny objects like dimes and shiny pennies. So they will be attracted to that. I put money, little shiny pennies, brand new, into the flower pots here. And when I go back within a couple of months or weeks, they're gone. There's nothing there. The pennies are gone. They take them to the next dimension and play with them there. And they'll bring them back sometime, and maybe you'll find one on the floor. They're very
I think you need
fun with that.
I think you need to also mention that when you're taking something like a stone from
if you-
nature,
If you take something, you're right, you gotta ask them.
you need to ask permission.
Yeah. So I asked permission for everything I've got here, and they all are here in the house right now. We've got crystals. All your crystals have a fairy in them that looks like a shimmering, crystalline looking silvery fairy with blue highlights. They look like fairy mixed with an elf. They take on the form. So even though we know about elves, which I've had here in the house and seen and been out of body with them in our Central Park, as well as our favorite, Hercules and my favorite, the centaurs and kentors. Those guys are great. They are out there too in our Central Park, in any forest. They're all over. And they work with nature in all different ways. I have a book we're finishing and writing on what they do and what their specialty is, including the dragons of the air and the land. So we have lots of, we had a land dragon here. It resembled a Chinese dragon with whiskers and everything, but it had fur on its neck going down its back instead of scales like a dinosaur. So she was
And more
and
paws.
dog paws.
Yep.
Paws, not paws like a dragon or anything. And very cute, very precious and beautiful. And I asked the fairies, where'd she come from? And they said, followed you home from Central Park. And it was under our couch because it's a ground dragon. So they want to stay under stuff. So we're in an apartment. So I would come out and play and run around here. And I've seen it run around 3D, physical 3D around me. So I drew that dragon. I haven't painted it yet, but I have a drawing of it. So I just want people to know, yeah, if you're intuitive and you can see psychically, you will be able to see them. Again, the fairies always tell me, we let you see us. they'll come to play with us to see if if we can see them with the ball of light or blue or purple, and they'll move by us peripherally, or you'll see them in the distance fluttering in your plants. And if you focus to them and say, I hope I can see you more clearly, I love you. They respond to love a lot. They love that energy of love. And then they've said, if people recognize who we are and that we are here with the plants and the animal kingdom, and the fairies that take care of the animals are called bootial angels, but fairies that take care of animals just adore the animal that they're taking care of, including lynxes or any birds, so they'll protect them from the predator animals, trying to shield them so the animal doesn't see them. And I was shown that by another elf, how they do that. So they do protect certain animals, like if rabbits are their favorite, they'll do that, and they'll try to protect a rabbit from another predator coming by. They're not always with the animal, but they do that. They sense something. The fairies will come and try to protect that little animal that's their friend. They love pets, dogs, cats, parakeets, everything. So I'm trying to figure out if I said enough, but again, with water spirits, water sprites, they might call them too. I sketched a picture of them in pastel, but it's not here, of bubble-like people. They have translucent, bubbly effect, translucent skin, lavender, purple, blue, and you see through them, yet they move and you see 3D. So these are the ones that came out of the water, out of the foam of the ocean. And that's when you see the sea babies, as we call them. They come out of the foam of the ocean, they're playing on the seashore, and they come up and they run around and they go back in the water. If they stayed near the seashore land, that becomes an elf that loves the sea. So the rock that I have here was a rock that was in the sea, and her name is Bailey. But when I found her, and they pointed to her, and she pointed to the rock, and I asked her, do you want to come home with me? I have a lot of elves and fairies. She said, yeah. So these all said they wanted to come home, but she was underwater, she told me, being tumbled around. And she called herself the seafaring fairy. She tells me I'm a rustic elf. And you got to think how funny it is. If you see the costumes that they put on, she looks piratey in her outfit. And she looks like she's like, I'll check on everybody. But she's really fun. And I'm going to be drawing pictures of them the way they respond and talk with all of us here. And they make friends with everyone here. They go out daily to the other fairies and other plants out in the other buildings which have courtyards.
We're near Central Park.
So they go out and they come back and tell us what's going on. And they bring their friends in to see stuff. So we have pictures of we made with rocks. These are actual photographs of rocks that we have in crystals. And we have the plants. But that's showing we did this with plants as well and framed them, and we have them on a mantle. So they brought their little fairy friends in to see the pictures on the mantle. They're going, that's a family photo? We're saying that's what they said. Like, is that like a family photo? These are all our plants with their names. And so they said they were very happy. Look, we got pictures. We're in here. So this is how they talk with each other and play. And then they give us all this information. If anybody has a question, I could answer about the fairies, but remember the nature spirits go back to before the beginning of everything. Right. Control of everything. And he told me when I met him in 1976, upstate New York on a school field in the winter, he showed up with a unicorn, a centaur, an elf in the field, which was 6 feet tall, and a couple of little other elves and fairies, a couple of hovering fairies, and one angel of the field. So the angelics are coming from this realm, and they're not humans like us. But this is how they've told me all the things that they're about. Pan said to me, paint my children. And he meant all his babies, the family. So they told me how they progress and how this little sea fairy can progress to become a tree elf, let's say, in the future, or even Christmas trees. We've had a Christmas tree here once that was alive, a long little one. And I came out into the living room and it was dark. We had posters that we had in boxes. And the 2 cats we had were sitting on the boxes. Well, I just came in dimly to see what was out there, and the light from our courtyards came in. And I saw something stand up bigger than the cat and leap like a Peter Pan fairy, leap into the pine tree. And then when it left, looked like a boy, like Peter Pan, one cat was laying there, and one cat was sitting there, and they're both looking over to me the fairy elf was sitting with the cats on the poster boxes. So they show you that, it's amazing. And one time Phyllis went into bed. This is just last year. I was
And we
standing,
have-
turned around,
we
there's
have-
an elf next to
We
me.
have to start wrapping up because we have one more speaker, but
Okay.
it's very fascinating, and basically everybody represents a different perspective, and we have how these tales survive in lore that's ancient, how these tales survive in popular entertainment, how these tales survive because of people's personal experiences. So you brought a whole dimension to this topic. I want to thank you very much. And Phyllis, I want to thank you too, even though we only got to hear your voice and see your.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Hercules.
Love you guys.
And now, last but not least, we have Khamuast, who's going to bring us a Egyptian perspective on the mermaid phenomenon and sirens. Khamuast, are you with us?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Excellent. Well, I'm here. I'm ready when you are.
We're ready right now. It's your turn.
Okay. So what do I need to do to make myself more, I don't know, visible? Can you see me?
We can see you, but you're shaking the camera, so you're kind of like trippy, you're moving back and forth and stuff.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, here's what I want to talk to you about. You are the Lord of the Greeks, as we know. Okay,
thank
and we do know that in the Odyssey, Odysseus, Ulysses encountered sirens and mermaids. And they talk about them being, beautiful women that lure men to their death with their singing songs. That whole scenario originally happened in Egypt. They weren't really fish-like women. They like this classic mermaid. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, they weren't like this. They were more like sea snakes that had women's bodies. I was trying to explain that to somebody. They had long, thin, you'll see them on some of the hieroglyphs, snake-like bodies, cobra-like bodies with fins on them and a tail like a mermaid, but they're more of like a, and they were known to go out into the Mediterranean and sing all these beautiful songs and lure people off shore and also on boats to their death. They apparently lived on the sailor, unsuspecting sea people. Later on, it says that the sea peoples, the Atlanteans, brought them with them into the Mediterranean to almost as an army to fight against the Egyptians. So you have beautiful, long-haired, gorgeous, magnificent operatic voices humming and singing and luring people in long before Odysseus made his Odyssey. And before that, also in some of the pyramid texts, you'll see pictures of them on the walls. I'm afraid I don't actually have them here today, and I apologize for that. It was a little short notice. But they have long, skinny, snake-like undulant bodies from about the waist down, like a mermaid. They have human torso and faces. The hands are usually webbed. And it's very hard to see that. There are no statues of these people, but they are seen on temple walls. And they're supposed to also bring rain. So they work with Hate, the Nile god. They're like his daughter, but they also went around. So they weren't exactly friendly. They're not the cutesy mermaids we know about, like this little girl here. They don't look like that nice, sweet mermaid. These are angry creatures that are protecting the Mediterranean Sea. They're not in the Nile. They're seen there. The Queen Hatshepsut, we know, was a seagoing pharaoh, and she things they said while she was down in, I guess it was the Sea of the Red Sea, around the Arabian Peninsula. She recurred, and he said, had red hair and red eyes, and had attacked some of the boats. She went out with 9 boats and came back with 4. And she said that Egyptian mermaid demons were attacking her boat, and they used spears, and they also used high-pitched horns to shock them. So the sound killed them. So that's an interesting thing. And I do believe that when they wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad, that they knew about these things, and they also included them in those stories.
I think you're right. And when Marc was sharing his accounts, you can still find people on Greek islands who report similar encounters and very similar words, and have come to the same types of conclusions. And it sounds like what you're describing is what the people in India call the Nagas, which were another race of human, and they were very serpentine, and they could also lure people to their deaths, and they were very warlike, and they're sometimes depicted blowing on horns or conches.
You're also going to find them in Bali, and in Japan. I worked for a Japanese company for a long time, and I don't have them now. I gave them away as gifts. I had winged mermaids with a fish tail, and I guess look like bat wings. And the Balinesians have them too. And they fly down, and they have claws, and they will take children or unsuspecting people into the ocean and make a meal of them. These are, again, not positive energy. I don't know what it is. They feel we've interrupted their realm or their world, and they're a secret world, a secret realm. As Marc also said, they can change form. They're also known to change dimension. They can disappear at will and reappear, and that's been said for centuries in many cultures. And it wasn't known for some reason or other. That particular kind of being wasn't talked about in Egypt, but there they were. They say along the Nile, however, there was more, and you'll see them in tombs, a cobra man, a woman that will have the body of a cobra coming out of the water or coming out of a hole or a cave to attack or protect. The goddess Butu is a cobra, or she's a woman, half woman, half cobra. And that is kind of a sort of mermaid-like creature in that way too. And she's for defensive things. On the other hand, she's one of the two goddesses who protect Egypt, Butu and the Habit, the vulture and the cobra, upper and lower Urea cobra, that you'll see on many statues, on the forehead of the pharaoh or a queen or a god or a god. So that kind of thing. I mean, you won't see a fish on their head unless their name is Wanda, but you're going to see things like that happening all the time. I had to get silly, Hercules. I'm not a person. I can't take the world completely seriously. I mean, look what's going on. Sorry?
No, I said that's a good thing. We shouldn't take the world totally seriously all the time.
There is an Egyptian god, Bes, and he is a god of childbirth, but he's also the god of mischief and humor. And I don't know why childbirth would be funny, but he seems to do both of those things. And you have, I will call her Renanet, again, a cobra, but also can turn into an Osteronarix fish, which is kind of like tilapia. I haven't tasted them, but they were supposed to be a fish that was long since extinct, and they found them along the Nile. And the Egyptians said they were bad to eat because some of them turned into human spirits. So there you have a mermaid aspect.
Well, thank you. That brought a whole other cultural dimension, an ancient one, to our exploration today. And this will continue. I'm putting a lot of time and energy into Mythic Atlantis. So now there's a Facebook community. There's around 500 people there. There's 4 or 5 related groups that I've tied into it. We started the radio podcast, and now we're doing crossovers with the panel. So this is a topic that we will be revisiting, and I'll be inviting all of you to expand upon the things that you shared here today. We're going to be closing with contact information so the people who would like to learn more about you or about the subject can contact you. If you don't want to give out private information, they can reach you through me, and I'll gladly forward any information that I receive that's directed towards you.
Well,
So,
you know,
so
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt.
it's okay. We'll start with Khamuast. How can people reach you?
Reach me either on Facebook or by email, mkwaterman. How else could I be a mermaid? I'm a waterman. mkwaterman at icloud.com. You can also get me by phone, 516-50-691. I'm as shy as a volcano, so if you need me, just yell. Vesuvius, right, Hercules?
That's right.
Okay. Otherwise, yeah, Facebook, I'm on Instagram. I'm like everywhere, and I'm glad to help you. You know that I'm also working very hard to build a sanctuary so that we will all have a library and a temple that we can work in. And anyone who wants to contribute to that is perfectly welcome. I'm also helping friends of mine in South Carolina who are in a desperate need, trying to save their home. That is Rich and Steve Simon French. And if you want to help them out, I'm able to do that as well. So 516-650-3691 or iCloud, not iClown, iCloud.com, or through Hercules, of course.
Thank you so very much. And we'll go around the board here. Hal Rainbow.
If people want to reach me, they can email me at hrainb@aol.com. And yes, I am one of the people who never got off AOL.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
And next we will go around the board to Marc and Phyllis Brinkerhoff.
Okay. Well, I'm available for readings or spiritual consultations. And you can reach us on intergalacticmission.com, etuniversalzone.com, and marcbrinkerhoff.com. That's my art site.
And also at Facebook.
And Facebook. I always forget Facebook. You're right, guys. And Facebook. So that's basically it. I don't give out the home number, but they can reach me on the email, which is marcbrinkerhoff@yahoo.com.
And I just wanted to say that right now, we do not have an SSL certificate active on the 3 sites. So when you get there, they try to scare you away.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, we don't have enough
Yeah.
traffic to.
They try to scare people away by, like blackmailing us, come and pay your bill. We just didn't do it this time. We're holding off.
We might do it.
We'll do it probably later. The thing is that puts out a screen saying, you can't get into the site, but you can go scroll down and just go continue and you'll be fine.
Or another way to get in is through Facebook. All of the sites are listed on Facebook.
Oh yeah, Facebook, which is just my name. Thank you,
And also
Hercules.
YouTube,
Thank
Marc
you.
Brinkerhoff YouTube.
Oh yeah, YouTube. Sorry,
Because,
I'm not good at this. YouTube.
Marc,
Thank you so very much, Marc and Phyllis. And next we move to Brian Walker of Brian's Drive-In Theater.
Thank you, Hercules. Please reach me through Facebook. If you get into Facebook, you can either run a search for Brian's Drive-In Theater or Brian Walker. It would be better to run one for Brian's Drive-In Theater. And that's the way I prefer to be contacted. You can hit me up through Messenger.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. And last but certainly not least, the amazing, my wonderful wife, Athena Victory.
Hi, I guess you could get in touch with me. I have a YouTube channel called We Put the We in Halloween. I haven't put much up there lately because I usually just review the Mego monster figures that I love so much. I can also be found on Facebook, and I have several groups because I have a lot of different interests. If you're interested in spooky stuff, you would go to We Put the We in Halloween. If you're interested in just weird memes, it must be a full moon. And I have another one called Sabertooth Pride, which deals with cats and felines of all kinds, especially my love for Ice Age mammals and weird. I have a rather eclectic taste, let's just put it that way. I can be found on Facebook as Athena Victory. but I'm not too that big on friend requests. I'll just warn people.
Thank you so very much, and thanks to everybody. This was an awesome conversation. I know I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to a continuance of this conversation. Everybody have a wonderful day. If all goes well, this will post at midnight tonight, and whenever it posts, I will send you links to it. So you should have the links.
Thank you. So
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
love you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.